No one in Silver Creek expected the fourth bride to last a week. Some said she would leave before sundown. Others said she would not even make it to the ranch. The name of Tom Walker carried weight in that town, and not the good kind. People whispered it like a warning. Half Apache, they said, quiet like a storm that does not show itself until it breaks you. 3 women had come before Ruth. 3 women had left with fear in their eyes and stories they never finished telling. The stagecoach rolled into town under a hard blue sky. Dust clung to the wheels and the horses breathed heavy. Ruth Collins stepped down with one small case and a straight back. She was not young, not soft, and not afraid. Her brown dress was plain, her boots worn, and her eyes steady. She did not look around for approval. She looked for direction. The driver pointed with his chin. Walker Ranch is that way. 10 miles east. You sure about this? Ruth nodded once. I am sure. Inside the town store, men stopped talking. A woman near the counter crossed herself. Someone muttered that the last bride cried all night. Ruth heard none of it, or she heard it all and chose silence. She bought bread, coffee, and salt. She tied her case tight and stepped back into the sun. Tom Walker waited at the edge of town with a mule wagon. He did not step down to greet her. He did not smile. He did not offer help with her case. He watched her with dark eyes that had learned not to expect much from people. His skin was weathered, his hair black and tied back, his shoulders heavy with work and history. You, Ruth Collins, he said. Yes, you can still turn back. I will not. He nodded once and turned the mule. The wagon creaked forward. Ruth climbed in without a word. The town faded behind them. The land opened wide and empty. Wind moved the grass like water. The silence between them grew thick. Tom did not speak. He drove with focus, eyes forward, jaw tight. Ruth watched the land. She counted fence posts. She noticed the way the road curved near the river and how the hills rose like tired backs in the distance. She noticed how Tom kept his hands steady on the reins and how his shoulders tensed when birds lifted suddenly from the brush. By the time the ranch came into view, the sun was low. The house stood alone, wood darkened by years, roof patched more than once. A barn leaned slightly to the east. Smoke rose thin from a stone chimney. No flowers, no fence near the house, just land and sky and quiet. This is it, Tom said. Ruth stepped down. The ground felt solid under her boots. She looked at the house, then at Tom. It will do. He studied her face, waiting for something. Fear, doubt, tears. None came. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and old coffee. 1 table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner. A second room held tools and a small stove. Everything was clean but bare, like a place meant to survive, not to welcome. You sleep there, Tom said, pointing to the bed. I take the chair. That will not work, Ruth said. You will need rest to work. I can take the chair. He frowned. No one asked you to work. She set her case down and opened it. Inside were folded clothes, a sewing kit, and a small Bible. I came to be a wife. That is work. He turned away and said nothing. That night the wind picked up. The house creaked. Ruth lay awake, listening to Tom breathe in the chair. She did not cry. She did not pray for rescue. She thought of the other women and wondered what they had seen that made them leave. She wondered what Tom had seen that made him stop trying to explain himself. Morning came cold. Ruth rose before dawn and lit the stove. She made coffee the way her father taught her, strong and steady. When Tom woke, the cup was waiting on the table. He stared at it. You did not have to. I wanted to. They ate in silence. Then Tom stood. Ranch work starts now. You stay here. I will not. He paused. This is not town life. I know. He looked at her again, longer this time. If you get hurt, that is on you. Fair enough. Outside, the day stretched wide. Tom walked toward the barn. Ruth followed. The land watched them both. Somewhere in Silver Creek, a clock struck the hour. By nightfall, the count would begin. Day 1. No bride had made it past 7. Ruth did not plan on leaving. By the third morning, the ranch had begun to test her. The cold cut deeper before sunrise, and the wind came down from the hills sharp and restless. Ruth pulled on her coat and stepped outside without waiting to be told. Tom was already saddling a horse, his movements quick and practiced. He glanced at her once, then looked away, as if he had already decided how this would end. "You do not have to prove anything," he said. "I am not proving," Ruth replied. "I am learning." The horse snorted. Somewhere in the distance, cattle shifted, their low sounds rolling across the land. Tom handed her a pair of worn gloves without comment. She took them and slipped them on. They fit close, like they had been waiting. They worked until her hands burned and her back tightened. She learned how to open gates without spooking the cattle. She learned how to walk the uneven ground without watching her feet. She learned that Tom spoke little but noticed everything. When she struggled, he did not rush in. When she succeeded, he did not praise. He simply nodded and kept moving. At midday, they rested near the creek. Ruth poured water from the canteen and offered it. Tom hesitated before taking it. His eyes flicked to her hands, red and raw, and something shifted in his face before it hardened again. The first trouble came that night. A knock hit the door after dark, sharp and unwelcome. Tom stood instantly, one hand already near the rifle. Ruth stayed seated, her heart steady but alert. Through the window, 3 men stood in the yard. Town men, familiar faces from Silver Creek. "We heard you got yourself another bride," one of them called. His voice carried a grin. "Thought we would see how long this one lasts." Tom opened the door just enough to be seen. "Leave," one man laughed. "Careful now. You scare women off, not men." Ruth stood then and stepped into view beside Tom. The men fell quiet. They had expected fear. They had expected hiding. "I am staying," she said clearly. "So if you came to count days, you may stop." A pause settled heavy in the air. One man spat into the dirt. Another shook his head. "She does not know you," he said. Ruth met his eyes. "Neither do you." They left soon after, their laughter thinner than before. Tom closed the door and leaned against it, his breath slow but deep. "You should have stayed out of sight," he said. "I will not live afraid in my own home." The word home landed between them and stayed there. The next days passed harder. A fence line collapsed. A calf went missing. A storm rolled in fast, drenching the land and turning the ground to mud. Ruth slipped once and scraped her knee. She said nothing and kept going. That night, Tom brought her a clean cloth without speaking and left it on the table. By the 5th day, the town's whispers reached the ranch in other ways. A trader arrived and lingered too long, asking questions that had nothing to do with supplies. "They say you are dangerous," he told Ruth with a half-smile. "Half Apache blood makes a man unpredictable." Ruth's eyes did not waver. Work makes a man tired. Silence makes people nervous. The trader left uneasy. That evening, Tom finally spoke what had been circling between them. They sat at the table, lamp burning low. "They see what they want to see," he said. "My mother was Apache. She died when I was young. My father drank himself into the ground. I learned early not to beg for acceptance." Ruth listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "I am not here to save you." He looked up, surprised. "I am here to stay," she added. "Those are not the same thing." On the 6th night, the wind returned, louder than before. Ruth lay awake, counting the sounds of the house. Near midnight, she heard the barn door slam. Then a horse screamed. Tom was out the door before Ruth could speak. She followed, heart pounding. In the barn, a lantern lay broken. One horse had cut its leg on a loose board, blood dark against the straw. Tom's hand shook as he tried to calm it. Ruth moved without being asked. She held the horse's head, spoke low and steady, the way her mother once taught her. The animal settled enough for Tom to bind the wound. When it was done, they stood close, breath fogging the air.
"You did not run," Tom said quietly.
"I told you," Ruth answered. "I am staying." Day 7 dawned clear and cold. The land held its breath. Ruth stood on the porch, watching the sun rise, knowing every bride before her had left by now. Behind her, the door opened. Tom stepped out and stood beside her. He did not tell her to go, and for the first time, Silver Creek was wrong. The town waited. Silver Creek always noticed patterns, and this one had never failed before. 7 days. By the 7th sunrise, the women packed their bags. Some left angry. Some left crying. Some did not look back at all. The town told itself the story was finished before it ever began. But Ruth did not pack. On the 8th morning, she rose as she always had, before the light fully reached the hills. She swept the floor, set water to heat, and stepped outside to greet the land. The air was cold and clean. The ranch felt different now, not softer, but steadier, like something that had stopped bracing for loss. Tom watched her from the barn doorway. He had slept little. All night he had waited for the sound of a case being dragged across the floor. It never came. Instead, he smelled coffee. "You stayed," he said, more statement than question. "Yes," Ruth answered. "I said I would." He nodded, slow and careful, as if trusting the moment might break it. They worked that day without tension. The fence held. The cattle moved easy. The horse's legs showed signs of healing. Small victories, but real ones. A week later, Tom rode into town for supplies. Ruth went with him. When they stepped down from the wagon, conversation stopped. Eyes followed them. Someone whispered. Someone else stared too long. Ruth felt it and kept walking. Tom's jaw tightened, but he did not turn back. Inside the store, the owner cleared his throat. "Did not expect to see you again," he said to Ruth. "I live here now," she replied. The words spread faster than wildfire. By sundown, Silver Creek knew the truth. The curse had failed. The half-Apache rancher had a wife who did not run. Not everyone approved. Some doors stayed closed. Some voices stayed sharp. But time does what fear cannot. It wears down lies. Life settled into something close to peace. Ruth planted a small garden near the house. Tom fixed the lean in the barn. Evenings found them at the table, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about nothing important at all. They learned each other slowly, without forcing what was not ready. One night, months later, a storm hit hard and fast. Thunder shook the house. Rain came down in sheets. Ruth woke to the sound of fear, not her own. Tom sat upright, breath tight, eyes distant. Memories had found him. Ruth reached for his hand. She did not speak. She stayed. His breathing slowed. The storm passed. In that moment, something sealed between them. By spring, Silver Creek had changed its tune. Children waved when the wagon passed. A woman brought Ruth cloth for a new dress. The store owner asked Tom about the cattle prices. The ranch was no longer a warning. It was a place. One afternoon, Tom stood beside Ruth at the fence line, watching the land stretch out under a wide sky. "They were wrong about me," he said. Ruth shook her head. "They were afraid. That is different." He looked at her. "Why did you really stay?" She thought of all the places she had not belonged, all the time she had been temporary. "Because you did not ask me to be small," she said, "and because this place needed someone who would not leave." He reached for her hand, rough fingers closing around steady ones. Years later, when people spoke of Tom Walker, they spoke of a fair man, a quiet man, a ranch that stood strong. And when they spoke of Ruth, they said she was the woman who stayed past 7 days and changed everything. The land remembered it too, because some homes are not built by love at first sight.